Let's turn to exploring the Shema, discussions on the issues of Trinity. This is a 30-minute long segment, but it's broken up into 5 short videos of usually 5 to 6 minutes each. So if you're watching one of the segments, one of these videos, one part, like part 1 of 5, make sure you watch the entire 30-minute segment, or just watch all 5 parts of the video so that you don't lose the context of what we're talking about. So we're in this section of part 3 of a paper that I wrote on the Trinity, on the tripart nature of God. You know, I'm a Trinitarian believer, and so these are the opinions that I'm going to bring to this discussion. And what we've been going through are part 3, which is who or what is the Holy Spirit. We're working our way towards anticipating, looking at some verses about the Holy Spirit specifically. Is he an it? Is he a person? Is he personal? What are his attributes? How can we know from the Bible how to identify who or what the Holy Spirit is? But what I'm doing first is I'm going back into my own notes and borrowing something from, I think this is part 2. We've already looked at this probably months, maybe in a year ago, but I'm going back and revisit it in preparation for turning into these verses again. And here's where I left off last week. Indeed, these are my own notes. Indeed, commenting on Hebraic thought versus Greek thought. And I recommend that you see my paper 1 of this commentary. And I say within the scope of attempting to unravel the ontological nature of God and Christology, we have Messianic author, who, you guessed it, Tim Hegg, aptly noting. And many of you ask me, why do I always use Tim Hegg? What's the big deal? I mean, can't I use someone else? Yeah, I could. There are lots of resources out there that are available to you. I don't only use Tim Hegg, but the old saying goes that, you know, when you find a fountain that just is got really good water, you're going to keep drinking from that fountain, right? If you find a source, or we can use a restaurant analogy, right? You find a restaurant that's really feeding you, right? The prices are good and the food is good. You're going to keep going back to that restaurant. Okay, Tim Hegg is like that fountain, or like that restaurant. He's got some really good water to drink. He's got some really good food to eat, and the prices are good, right? Follow through with my analogy. So he's just a great resource, and his commentaries are parked on the web at Torah-resource.com. So I highly recommend that you go check it out. All right, so that's one of the reasons why I turn to his notes over and over again. All right, so let's look at what he has to say. This is in a relationship to not to the Matthew study. This is Trinity now. Here's what Tim says. And we're talking about this idea of Hebraic thought versus Greek thought. And the reason this is relevant, before I jump into Tim, the reason this is relevant for us in our study is because we live in a modern age where we've lost the appreciation for the Hebraic way of interacting with the scriptures. We have to remind ourselves over and over again when we're studying the Bible that we're reading documents that are, 2,000 years or older. And what that has created is kind of a distance between the mindset of the way that people thought when they wrote the Bible and the mindset of the way we think when we read the Bible. And so how this is relevant to Trinity is that what I believe is important, or what I believe is put forth for us to think about, is that when we study through ancient Hebrew writings, not just the Bible, but extra-biblical writings as well, so we can gain kind of an historical appreciation for the Hebraic worldview that the writers lived in, what we find is that there's this concept known as Hebraic thought, where there's a tension. And I'll put a little graphic on the screen, a tension between a thought that's over on one side of the room or the table and another thought that's over on the different side of the room or the table. And they seem to be opposite one another logically. But since we trust both of the thoughts and the ideas implicitly, we trust them, right, with everything that we've got, then rather than discarding one in favor of the other, in the Hebrew mind, we actually keep both of those concepts and we allow them to create a tension between one another by pulling against one another. And so this is known as Hebraic tension. The analogy that I'm going to put on my screen, the little graphic, is a tug of war between two people pulling a rope. And if you think about the analogy, the picture, if you take a rope and string between two parties and they start pulling in opposite directions, there's tension on the rope, and the rope is pulled tight or taut, and the rope is pulled right straight. It's because they're pulling, one's pulling his direction, the other guy's pulling the other direction, the rope is going tight, And in one sense, it's a stalemate. Neither party is going anywhere. There's no progress being made. And so from one perspective, that seems to be a failure on the part of progress, right? Why would you want tension going in two opposite directions? There's no progress. You're not going to get anywhere, right? It seems to be that common sense would say if one party would concede, then progress can be made going one direction or the other. And indeed, that's the kind of comparison between Hebraic thought versus Greek thought. Greek thought prefers progress. It likes when concession is made or agreement is made or compromise is made in some cases, and at least you've got direction moving one way or the other. There's flow, right? Versus this tug of war where neither party is making any ground. They're just both pulling against each other. The rope doesn't go anywhere.